So today we're learning Igeres HaKodesh, the fourth section. Tanya, we're on page Kuf Tes, about 8-9 lines from the top after the period. The words on the line is an acronym for Vav Zayin Shin, which stands for V'zeh Shekatuf, V'zeh Shekosuf. But the Alter Rebbe is explaining here his idea of Chazal, is say Kibiyutke Tzurei Lomim, with the two letters of Hashem's name, the Yud and the K, the first two letters of the holy name of Yud K Vav K, he created the world. The Alter Rebbe explains that although the Chazal literally mean the second, the Hey, the Yud K, it's the first Hey of the Shem Hashem. The Alter Rebbe here in Tanya says it refers to the second K. So right away it's a contradiction to the Gemara. The Alter Rebbe is not contradicting the Gemara. And he explains that the axis and the purpose of the first K is the ultimate last K, which is Malchus. The first Hey is Bina, right? The Yud is Chochma and Hey is Bina, Vav the Midas, and the last Hey is Malchus, which is Dibur, which is the creative force for the world. And the Alter Rebbe says that the Yud Kei Tzurei Lomim, Hashem created the world. He means this world, not the world of Bina. The world of Bina is wonderful and important, but without this world, the last K, you don't have a full name of Shem Hashem. So what does it mean, Kib Yud Kei Tzurei Lomim? So the Chazal say that B'Yud Nivra Elam Haba, Kei Nivra Elam Hazeh, right? That with the Yud, the Olam Haba, the world to come was created, and with the K, the Olam Hazeh, the physical world. So according to Chazal, the K refers to Bina, right? The Alter Rebbe says, no, it really refers to the last K, to Malchus, because the Malchus creates the physical world, but the way to access Malchus is through the first K. That's in brief his explanation. And what does it have to do with what we're learning? That we're going to see today, the connection between that and how Vayas David Shem. David created God's name. Not only did he make for himself a name and make for God a name by burying his enemies, which I told you last time is an amazing lesson for us. Here Eretz Yisrael is killing all these enemies, and imagine they would go and bury the enemies. So there would be criticism upon criticism. Well, this pasuk says exactly that David HaMelech, who killed his enemies, went and buried his enemies, and because of that, Vayas David Shem, he made a Kiddush Hashem, he made a Kiddush of God, a sanctification of God's name, because he buried his enemies. That's what it says in the pasuk. You could jump up and down, right and left, be happy, not be happy, that's what it says. The Alter Rebbe comes along, and based on the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, and the Zohar says that the interpretation is not just that God was sanctified, and even David HaMelech was recognized as such a great warrior and leader that he had the empathy to bury his own enemies, which of course is one with the meaning that he's sanctifying God's name. Here is an individual, David, who is really a leader, a Jewish leader, emulating God. Hashem says, this is what needs to be done. Don't ask questions. I'm God. Comes the Zohar and says that what's really happening is he created God's name. In other words, without doing this, God's name is incomplete. And the Zohar explains this is the idea of giving tzedakah to the poor. So the Alter Rebbe's question is, what's the connection between giving tzedakah to the poor to creating God's name? That was the opening phrase in this fifth letter. And now we're going to learn the end, and we'll put it all together. So let's go. 8-9 lines from the top, page Kuf Tes, V'zeh Shekosuf. It said Tanakh, the Chacham should not praise, shouldn't kind of say, I'm such a wise guy. And the pasuk says, "I saw the chochem b'chmosai, I saw the gibar b'gibarosai, osher b'oshrei." The wealthy shouldn't praise. I'm so great because I have wealth and I have strength. Kiim, rather, b'zois yishalil. With this is what you should praise. Ki ani Hashem oiseh chesed. For I am God that does chesed. What do we see from the pasuk? We see that Ashirus and Gibor and Chochmah are not the ultimate. The ultimate is Ani Hashem oiseh chesed. And he explains, Ki ha-chesed hu ha-mamshich chaye ha-chochmah lamata. It is chesed that draws down the life level of chochmah, of wisdom, below, on earth. In other words, without chesed, you can be a chochem, you can be gibor, you can be usher, and you're not there. You have nice fascinations, nice adjuncts, but to be in and to do the kavanah, you need to do chesed. And he continues. V'im lav, and if you don't do the chesed, hari nikras chochma soy levadoi b'li amshochas chayim imenu chas v'sholem. Then your chochma is called your chochma, but it doesn't have the element of chayim, of life. Real life is drawing the chochma into chesed. Arizal says there are two types of souls amongst Jews. One, Nishbas Talmid Chacham, the souls of the scholars, the Talmid Chachamim, who are involved in the study of Torah all their lives. That's number one. Number two, the Neshames Balei Mitzvahs, souls of people who do mitzvahs, who are involved mostly in tzedakah and gemilas chesed. Comes along the Alter Rebbe and he asks, what's the Arizal saying? We know that even Talmid Chachamim have to be involved in gemilas chasodim, in doing acts of benevolence. Shafilu Torah ein loi, shafilu Torah ein loi. Chazal say that a Talmud Chacham who doesn't do gemilas chasodim, that he doesn't even have the virtue of Torah, even though he studied, but he doesn't get the spiritual credit for Torah if he's lacking gemilas chasodim. Ella, the Alter Rebbe explains the meaning of the Arizal. Shall tell me the Chachomim shetoirosam ikra, the souls that are associated with Talmid Chachomim, which means that the primary aspect of the souls of the neshamas is Torah. And most of they spend learning Torah, and the minority of their days is begamach. The impact of the arousal from below, to arouse the divine kindness, to draw it down and to descend the infinite light of God. Which invests itself in supernal wisdom, which is the source of their Torah in their mouth, is only to I'll explain in a moment, are only to those souls in the world of creation. The Asik Talmud is through the study of Talmud. The Alter Rebbe is saying that Talmid Chachomim have to know that even though their learning is primary, that's what they do most of the time, right? They're not running to the hospitals to visit people and to bring them food, and they're not putting on film with Jews on the corner and not helping people kasher. They're not it's Eisek HaTorah, right? What you have all over Yisrael, Yerushalayim, the Kailim, and all that. There's the Alter Rebbe, for that Torah to be Chaim, to be alive, to be pure, it requires to know that the purpose of your Torah learning is the Chesed. And if there's a blockage between the Torah learning and the Chesed, then your Torah learning is not the pnimius. It's not the Torah learning. You're not connecting. That's what he says. This is, if you want to identify with Bria, the world of creation. What about Malachim, the angels, Shebi Yetzirah, which are in the world of formation? This is through the study of Mishnayos. Yan heyois chayis haneshomes v'malachim nishpois b'tzirufiyos adibur iteir shebal peh, because the life force of angels is through the combination of our learning with our mouth, the oral Torah, which is Mishnah, and as you said before, the source of Isius comes from Chochmah. Avo, if you want to draw down the hey, remember we learned in last year, some of you weren't here, but every letter begins with ha. You have to emit, air. Whether it's a bays, a dalet, whatever, that's called he, ha, hey. So in the Zohar HaKodesh, it's called Osa Klila, the weak letter. Why is it weak? Because it doesn't say anything. Ha. And it's the beginning of bays, because as soon as you say bays, you're emitting the ha within the bays is swallowed up, but it's there. It's air. In other words, hey, ha, is air. So what the Alter Rebbe says here is that this hey, tato, is the way to access everything before the Yud Kei Vav through the hey. And this is a very, very deep point. In other words, you can have the Yud, you can have the K, and you can have the Vav. You can have the intelligence, Avram. You can have the character refinement. The Bina, the understanding. And you can even have the Vav, the character refinement of the emotions. But if you don't have the last Hey of the Shem Hashem, they haven't reached their destination. Very, very powerful. I got to close the window. Hold on. So that's what he says here, that the hey tato, the last hey, is necessary, and the only way that you can bring the Yud Kei Vav, the first three letters, into reality. In other words, let me just take it out of context for a moment. Imagine someone's learning. He's learning a deep Tosfos. He's learning a deep Maimer. And he doesn't access at the end the Hey Tato, which means the Chesed, the bottom line. Sorry. It's meaningless. It's garnished. It's nothing. Go to a koil and stay there. It's nothing. Limud HaTorah. The purpose of Limud HaTorah is Chesed. And if your Limud HaTorah doesn't lead to Chesed, then the Limud HaTorah is not the then you don't have the Shem Hashem. You have Yud, Kei, Vav, and you're missing the last Hey. That means the Shem is not Sholem, Velvel. The Shem, God's name has not been created in a complete, wholesome way. Thank you very much. I have Yud, Kei, Vav. That's what he says here. I mean, he's using some Kabbalistic ideas, but I heard this Rabbi Yoel, as he explains this Tanya. Let's continue. Look what he says. So the Hey Tato, Lo'elam Hazeh HaShofel, it draws down the Yud Kei Vav to this lower world through Tzimtzum Godel B'Yeser Eiz. It's a great contraction, very mighty. It's not enough just to do it through the Torah scholars who do Chesed and Gemilas Chasodim miut Yemeim, some of their time. Elo, It requires al yedei sarusa the balei mitzvahs, top of page 218. It requires the involvement of the balei mitzvahs ha'iskim b'reiv yameim b'tzedakah gemach. All of us. We all have jobs. More or less. That's that's what I mean balei tzedakah v'chesed. Right? The Alter Rebbe says this is necessary to draw the K down, the K Tato. As he says, I explained in the first section, and therefore, Nikru Tamche Oraisa. Who is called the supporters, like the Babich Yeshiva is called Tomche Tmimim. Tamche means support. Who is called Tamche Doraisa? Not the people learning in Kailo. You would think, Isser, Tamche Doraisa, the supporters of Torah, those that sit and learn. No. Those are the Torah learners. Tamche Doraisa. Who are the Tamchim of Torah? Tafke, the Bale Chesed. Vehein, Chinas u'madreges netzach v'hoyt. The kidneys. We have two doctors here. You need functioning kidneys. You can have a good head and a good heart. I mean, and if the kidneys aren't functioning, you're in deep trouble. That's why we have, I could say, Baruch Hashem, they have today dialysis to help a person. You shouldn't have to come onto it, but so you need netzach v'hoyt. Netzach is splendor, victory, endurance. Hoyd is splendor, acknowledgement. In other words, it's called in the Zohar, Trei Rei. It's the two that give advice. It's the bottom line. It's not just philosophizing, but to take the ideas, to take the information and to bring it into reality. See, the Alter Rebbe says clearly, what do Netzach v'Hoy do? They draw down the Oira Torah, the light of Torah, the Olam Asiyah. Without Velvel, the kidneys, we have a blockage between the Oira Torah, the mind, the heart, and all that, and the world below that we live in. And you see this taka many times with people who are very smart and very bright, but they're very weak when it comes to bottom line, to practicality, to chesed, to gemilas chasadim, and all of that. Now the Rebbe goes back now and he says, if you look, that's why tzedakah is called Maisa action. Kosov. And he's going to talk about this later in other places as well. And it shall be the act of tzedakah peaceful. Nasha. Why does it say Maisa tzedakah? V'hoya nesinas hatzedakah. The giving of tzedakah. What do you mean the act of tzedakah? Al Shem answers the Alter Rebbe. You know why the pasuk uses the word Maisa for the purpose of tzedakah shepulosa. Its job is laham shechayir Hashem lo'ilam asiyah. The word Maisa is associated with the word asiyah. The purpose of tzedakah is to bring oir and sof in the infinite energy and light of Hashem into the world of action. Now he goes and explains what he brought in the beginning of the chapter, the holy language of the Holy Zohar. Quote, Man the Ovid Shmo Kadisha, who creates Ovid, the holy name, the one who gives tzedakah to the poor. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Ovid Daike, the Zohar is particular in using the word Ovid, to make, to do. Because when we arouse ourselves to do kindness, tzedakah, and chesed, tato, below here on earth, Ma'oyer chesed elyin, we arouse supernal chesed, lahamshich oirin sof, to draw down the infinity of God, miprinas chochmah, from the supernal chochmah, yud shel shem Hashem, lehei shel shem prinas hadibur. We draw down from the yud, the first letter, all the way down to the last hey, not to the second hey. Of course it goes to the second hey, but the purpose is, the way Dr. Rebbe explains, is the last hey, malchus, dibur. Kedei v'ruch b'mizborah kedei lahashpia lo'olam ha'asiyah. V'hoya ma'aseh tzedakah. If you don't draw down the yud into the last hey, you're not connecting to asiyah, to ma'aseh, to action. For example, very interesting mashal. Dr. Rebbe says a person doesn't speak to himself. If he does, he's either locked up or whatever. We shouldn't. Unfortunately, sometimes a person gets ill and talks to themselves. But a normal person, that's the head is working and all of that properly, your brain is working, doesn't speak to himself. Only to other people. And not between him and himself. 1 second. What does a person do when he speaks to others? He has to contract the knowledge and information that he has when he speaks to others. And Dr. Rebbe concludes the chapter of Amaskilim, and the wise ones, Yavinu, will understand this. Now, there's a lot in these two words. I mean, what does he mean? So first, the simple meaning is that those that will think about the connection between the mashal that he gives here and the nimshal, that's number one. And then the two words apply to the rest of the chapter. The first, they address what we just learned, this mashal. What is the mashal? The mashal is that in order for dibur to be effective, it needs to be lacherim. If you talk to yourself with all of your genius and your wisdom, it's not normal. In other words, but I'm a genius. I have all this information. I go to a wall and I start talking to myself. We're not talking about practicing your speeches. We're talking about, then you're lacking the purpose of all that knowledge. The purpose is to give over la'acherim. The purpose of me preparing a shir and Tanya is that you should understand. If you don't understand, then there's something missing in my preparation or my delivery, whatever the case, in my understanding. But I understand it. You can't explain it to someone else, then you really don't understand it. And I saw this with Rabbi Yoel by our Mashpia. His genius, and he was a genius of all sorts, but was that he was able to take these very deep concepts in Chassidus and bring it down to a 5-year-old. Amazing. And not all teachers and Mashpiim had that. And most did, in fact, to that level of taking the deepest ideas and bringing them down to a young boy. That's an amazing feat. But the Alter Rebbe says that the purpose of these neshamas who are even tzaddikim, who are talmidei chachamim, is chesed lemata, asiyah, v'hoya ma'aseh tzedakah. That's the connection over here. And if not, it's not normal that you talk to yourself. In other words, if not, it's not the connection. And the second broader meaning of Maskilim Yavinu is to the overall chapter. The overall Pedic. Alter Rebbe brings the Vayas David Shem, and David makes a name. He creates a name. And Alter Rebbe says at the end, we just learned the Ovid, and he brings the Zohar HaKodesh, How does he Ovid Shmo Kadisha? David creates God's name Lemischade by giving tzedakah lemisnicha to the poor. In other words, the act of tzedakah is what makes God's name, not the act of learning. That, according to the Zohar, not the act of learning, not the act of philosophizing. And as we learned earlier in one of the shiurim, that here in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe emphasizes the virtue of tzedakah over other mitzvahs. Right? Avram, what about you put on film this morning? You're doing other mitzvahs. We do mitzvahs throughout the day. It doesn't say that the other mitzvahs create God's name. It doesn't say that. There's other virtues. But this concept, Velvel, is specifically for giving tzedakah. And tzedakah, by the way, doesn't just mean putting money in a chariot box or writing a check. Doing tzedakah, right? I told you this many times, that tzedakah begufay, benafshay, ubamaynay. Right? Begufay means you exert your own body to help someone else. Schlepping someone's packages. Fixing their tire when it's 95 degrees on Route 1. And you get out of your car, you don't have to, you can go further, and you help them fix your tire. That's tzedakah begufay. You didn't pay for their tire. You didn't teach them about tires, but you actually helped change the tire. Tzedakah begufay. Benafshay. Tzedakah benafshay means you take someone else who doesn't know. Yesterday I got a call from someone who's in the U.S. Army, a Jewish person who just got back, and they say they would like to hear the shofar and maybe be at a meal, and it's been a long time. And Bashgocha Pratis, my wife said in the morning, "What's with so and so?" And I said, "I don't know. She went away, and she knows, And look at this. My wife reminded herself about her, and we're preparing to, to have people for Yom Tiv and all of that. And that discussion somehow went into the air, went into the environment, and she sends me yesterday afternoon a message. I'm back, and I would like to hear shofar. It's Rosh Hashanah. Sometimes I say 5 times the whole book of Tehillim. How do you say 5 times during the whole Tehillim on Rosh Hashanah? You know how? You don't talk. I barely talk in Rosh Hashanah. Right? Well, I can't invite guests and not talk at the table. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to hack a chinik, but you gotta be social, you gotta be normal, right? A person wants to come who's not knowledgeable of all these things. That's the bottom line. That's greater than your Tehillim, and it's greater than you're not talking to help another Jew hear the shofar. Understand about Rosh Hashanah. That's called tzedakah benafshay. I'm not changing their tire, and I'm not giving them money. I'm educating them. I'm teaching them. I'm sharing. And finally, there is tzedakah benafshay, to give tzedakah with your money, which we learned. We're learning it the whole time. And as Isser and I were talking about before the shir started, how the Alter Rebbe's demands of his Hasidim. I mean, you read these letters. He is mamish. He says you better give tzedakah, and he gives it to them. And Isser was saying, here, he says you should go borrow money, take money, loans. They don't have what to eat themselves. This is Russia. This is Ukraine. Late 1700s, early 1800s. Go and think about the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. And you think about it. It's like, on one hand, he's like a ruthless leader. Like, where's your empathy and sympathy for your own brethren? The answer is, without chesed, without tzedakah, your avodah is incomplete. That's what it says over here, That's not the Alter Rebbe's Chiddush. That's what it says in the Zohar HaKodesh. Who creates God's name? The one who gives tzedakah lemischene. You don't give tzedakah lemischene. You don't give tzedakah to the poor. All of your learning and all of your davening is very good, but you didn't connect with the last K of the Yud K Vav K. And if you don't have the last K of the Yud K Vav K, then the bottom line connection is not there. And this too, Chevra, is, as we're about to enter the new year, this too is the avodah of Rosh Hashanah, and to always include in our thinking, how do we take our learning and make it have a reality to help another Yid on the ground? Okay? So if you separate the two, you have the Yud K Vav K. I will grant you have the Yud K Vav K if you learn properly, understand properly, feel properly, act properly, absolutely. But the last K you don't have. That's what it says in this Igeres HaKodesh. And I think it's very, very important to think about it. Tomorrow we're going to have a little Farbrengen. So Hashem come, instead of Rosh Hashanah, one day before. Have a great day, everyone. Sei gesund. See everyone. Bye.
Very good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.